for the Warriors. Can you believe what you have just seen?
G'day and welcome to the Game Day Squad Rugby League Fantasy Show. I'm Dyl, that's Stu, and we are the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with Game Day Squad once again, everything you need to know to succeed in this rugby league competition. Stu, welcome, mate. We've got 2 team previews down, 3 to go. Which teams are in the spotlight tonight, and what can viewers from the show?
Yeah, that's right. G'day, Dyl. G'day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in as always. Yeah, tonight's 4 teams under the spotlight will be the Newcastle Knights, the New Zealand Warriors, your boys. I'm sure you'll have a few choice words to say about them. We've got the North Queensland Cowboys and the Parramatta Eels as well. So we had 4 in episode 1, just the 3 teams in episode 2, and we got it back to the full slate of 4. We're going to preview all of their ins and outs for season 2026. We're going to talk about some positional changes that might be pretty impactful or important for Game Day Squad. We're going to talk about their prime time, their Sunday Showdown, and their under 24 guns. We're going to pinpoint a couple of must-have players or maybe must-fade players from each club, so wait and see. And as always, we're going to finish the episode with another pack opening. There'll be 9 cards opened from an elite pack, and anyone from tonight's 4 teams, as well as the previous 7 teams that we have already covered, any of those players from those clubs get packed, and they'll go into the player giveaway pool, which is steadily building, and it's only going to get bigger and better throughout the next few previews. So if you want to have an opportunity to get your hands on those cards, stay tuned for the rest of the show, but make sure you're following us across all of our socials, particularly YouTube and Instagram, Apple and Spotify as well. And make sure you're commenting on those videos or on that audio and letting us know who your MVP for each of tonight's 4 teams are going to be. So you can get plenty of entries into that giveaway, and we'll give you plenty more information about that a little bit later on in tonight's show.
Yeah, you do not want to miss that. Look, we've already had some great cards in that giveaway pool already, so we've got plenty of opportunity to keep adding some to that giveaway pool. If you are new to Game Day Squad, there's still plenty of time for you to sign up. Head to the website, download the app, sign up using the promo code FBRL26, and that will get you 3 by 9 player common packs to get you started. In those common packs, generally there's going to be a whole lot of silvers, golds, maybe even a plat or a diamond as well. Plus, there will be a whole stack of bronze packs to get your team, your free-to-play NRL starter squad up and running as well. So plenty of opportunity to get involved. I know that the boys have put in a lot of work trying to get those competitions as balanced as possible, especially for new users. And I can tell you that even if you just put a team in, you are going to win some more packs and some more cards to continue building that depth of that squad. Plenty of opportunities to win, so make sure you get involved and use that promo code, once again, FBRL26. Alrighty, mate, let's jump straight into the team preview for tonight. In this episode, as you said, we're going to look at the Newcastle Knights, the New Zealand Warriors, North Queensland Cowboys, and Parramatta Eels. Do you want to start by talking through how the Knights went last season, what some of their ins and outs are, and then those notable role changes? Then we might have a chat about a couple of players.
Yeah, absolutely. 2025 was a pretty disappointing season. You can see that big F on the screen there circled for anyone watching on YouTube. So the Knights finished dead set last, bottom of the ladder. Only the 6 wins and the 18 losses. A really disappointing season from them. And look, they had a decent team on paper. They just couldn't put things together, and had some injuries at various times throughout the year, and a couple of talks about players coming to their club and that sort of thing, which obviously, was a little bit hard for them to put those, those whispers and that sort of information behind them and come out and play some decent footy. They obviously couldn't do both of those things. But I feel like their player movement, their ins and outs, I think they've come out on top, maybe marginally, with a couple of pretty handy signings. So, look, you can't get any worse than 17th. I don't think they're going to stay 17th. So I'm only going to expect the Newcastle Knights to be a little bit better. And a big reason for that will be some of their key ins. Obviously, Dylan Brown, massive signing on a lot of money. There was a lot of talk about his move over from Parramatta and how much money he was going to be on and that sort of thing. And that then talked a lot about Kalen Ponga and whether he'd stay at the club. So it had a pretty damaging effect. But look, that combination is going to be together there in that side. So I think they're going to have a fantastic partnership. Sandon Smith is a pretty interesting signing as well. He was really good in patches for the Roosters. I think he won an Anzac medal as well. look, he was pretty handy. They just can't fit him in at their club anymore with the signing of, DCE. So not exactly sure where we'll see Sandon line up. He could be at hooker, in the halves, maybe the 14 jerseys. So we might get into that a little bit later on. But yeah, I see him pretty handy, and he obviously provides some kicking off the tee as well. Trey Mooney, pretty underrated. Didn't get too much game time there at the Raiders behind a pretty solid forward pack. I think he's going to explode this season. I think he's in for a pretty big year. The biggest loss there is probably Kai Pearce-Paul. He was starting to really rip and tear and damage, cause some damage there on the right-hand side for the Knights. He's now moved over to the West Tigers, so that's a pretty good addition for them. But Jermaine McEwen, the young up-and-comer, I think he's going to slot into that right edge back row spot pretty nicely. Leo Thompson will be a handy acquisition for the Doggies. Jaden Brayley, probably a bit more of a depth piece there at the Raiders, probably not in their top two hookers at the moment. And with those ins and outs, it probably leaves us, with a couple of really notable role changes. We'll have to talk about the Fletcher Sharp one shortly, because Sandon Smith is definitely going to impact that in some capacity, you would have to think. And then Trey Mooney, I think definitely a big uptick. And we could see some pretty big weeks from him and a pretty sneaky pod, particularly in some Origin impacted rounds.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably the biggest player that I wanted to talk about was Trey Mooney, for a couple of reasons. Look, you can see our key under 24 eligible players there: Fletcher Sharp, Jermaine McEwen, Sandon Smith, and that man Trey Mooney. I think that's where we're going to get the most benefit from him. The other place that I think we're going to get quite a bit of benefit is the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. The Newcastle Knights have 13 games on a Sunday or a Monday, and that's the most of all teams. So although they did finish last season, they're going to be first in one aspect of 2026 at least. And I think, look, Trey Mooney is the big one there. He's moved over from the Raiders, likely to probably get that starting middle spot. Look, we've got a really small sample size to go off from last season, but he did play 2 games over 40 minutes. He had a couple of games under 40 minutes as well. But when he did play those couple of games over 40 minutes, he averaged 67 GDS points. And that was an average of 32 tackles, 110 running meters, and 5 tackle breaks in just 2 games. So, small sample size, but if he can replicate that over 40 minutes, that is a massive points per minute average. And I would be happy to roll him out if he's going to continue busting out those 60-odd points in 40 minutes. I'd be happy with that on a Sunday or even in my under 24 squad.
Absolutely, mate. And the PPM doesn't seem to dip with bigger minutes either. It's really similar around that 1.2 to 1.35 PPM, whether he's on the field for 25 minutes or whether he's on the field for 50 to 55 minutes. He's shown that he just keeps working whenever the coach wants him out there. So, yeah, look, I was really disappointed that he had to move on from the Raiders, but I see it. They have such a big, strong pack, and when Ricky's pretty set on his middlemen that he knows can get the job done for him, it's really hard to sort of break into that territory. But look, Trey Mooney, you're right there, Sunday Showdown. I think he's going to get plenty of starts, and he's going to be that solid, I reckon, 50 points in base pretty comfortably, provided the minutes are there. We want to see at least 40 to 45, and he should get there in tackles, run meters, and a couple of tackle breaks there as well. So, yeah, absolute safety there when the middle forward options are pretty limited. I'm really excited to see what he can do, even though he's going to be in different colours this season.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the other bloke you talked about or touched on is Jermaine McEwen. And as you said, KPP's gone. McEwen's coming in, likely to get that starting back row spot. I'm probably a little bit cold on McEwen. I'm tempering expectations a little bit. He played the final 7 games of the season at the back end of the season, starting on the edge. He averaged 73 minutes across those 7 games. He was only able to average less than 40 GDS points in 70 plus minutes. So it's a massive difference there, going from Trey Mooney getting 1.2 to 1.4 points per minute, where Jermaine McEwen can't even get half a point per minute. Or just roundabouts that. So, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned of his output. And obviously KPP is such a big body and was able to get his arms free quite a lot and made a lot of tackle breaks. I'm not sure if we're going to get the same from McEwen yet. That, he might build into that role. But at the moment, for me, I'm just sort of looking elsewhere. Although, depending on the Sunday Showdown and what those Sunday games make up, we might have to turn to someone like McEwen anyway, because they've got so many games on the Sunday.
Yeah, spot on. The numbers don't look fantastic from last season, but a big preseason, knowing that if he is the man for that right edge spot, he's spent a lot of time working on some combinations with the halves there and his tackling technique as well. Look, it was no secret that he missed plenty of tackles. He averaged 3.1 missed tackles per match. He even had one match where he missed 10 tackles. That was against the Bronx when the Bronx pantsed them. So probably, confidence took a bit of a bashing then. Still getting through his 100 meters per game. I just think, depending on which side of the field Dylan Brown lines up on, obviously depending who his halves partner is, a lot of balls going to go through him. If we see Fletcher Sharp stay in the halves and Fletcher stays on the left with Brown on the right, you can see, plenty more opportunity coming down McEwen's edge. If Brown does shift over to the left and we have Sandon Smith in there, there's plenty of combinations. I just see the preseason being beneficial for McEwen. I think he's going to slide into that role a little bit nicer now, form some combinations with the blokes inside and outside of him, and hopefully he's improved some of that tackling technique, because those, negative 9 points a match is pretty difficult. That's basically 90 run meters when you think about it. He's missing out on due to that average missed tackles per game. Not too concerned, but certainly not rushing out there to play him from game one.
Yeah, look, let's talk about the Fletcher Sharp, Sandon Smith, Dylan Brown, potentially even Kalen Ponga as a fullback as well. That sort of murky waters that we've got there. Fletcher Sharp, obviously the big notable role change. His GDS positioning has gone into the halves. He becomes less valuable now that he is a half. I think we obviously had the luxury of having him as a winger and playing him as a winger, and he would be the first picked winger each and every week. But yeah, now that he's got the half tag, I think he's a little bit less appealing. There is some whispers around him moving to the wing. What do you think about that? Do we think we see Sandon Smith taking that halves role? Do you think Fletcher Sharp's going to stay there? What is your gut telling you at the moment?
Yeah, first things first, just on Sharp's average, if he does stay in the halves, it was definitely a cheat code, 58.7 average there as a winger, playing in the halves, but we could play him as a winger in game day squad. Does move to the halves now in terms of his positional tag, but still that sort of third averaging or total averaging player. So it's not the end of the world. If he does stay in the halves, we can still play him, particularly on matchup if we expect the Knights to score. It's just not as appealing anymore, given that we don't get to play him out of position. Yeah, look, that situation at the Knights is unfolding just about every single day. We're hearing different pieces of information, different news. Fletcher Sharp back to the wing, where he has had plenty of success in the past before, but look, he's just not going to get through that same amount of base. And he was electric. If he had half a gap, he would just put his head down, bump off a tackle or two, and either score himself or set up one of the men inside or outside of him. That signing of Sandon Smith really sort of, makes that water a little bit murky, given how quality he is. And probably the downside for Fletcher Sharp is he's so versatile that he can play in the halves, on the wing, fullback if required. He would be also a weapon number 14 in a better team where he could just come on and cause havoc either side of the halfway bell. So, yeah, I think it's his versatility that might be his undoing. I feel like Marju, Dom Young, two fantastic wingers. It might even be Dom Young and Fletcher Sharp lining up there for game one, and Marju maybe having to prove himself. It's a good thing for the coach, I guess, that he's got these selectional headaches. It just doesn't help us out as Game Day Squad Rugby League fans and coaches because we want to get some certainty around these positions. Regardless, they've got to use Sandon Smith somewhere. In a perfect world, maybe he's their 9. Phoenix Crossland 13. Yeah. We've got Brown and Sharp in the halves, Ponga out the back. Let's make everyone happy and give everyone plenty of minutes. We want Sharp on the field for as long as possible. I'm just not sure we're going to see him in that preferred position where he can average over 50.
And look, they have released their team list for the trials or the preseason competition coming up, and it does have Sandon Smith and Fletcher Sharp in the halves at the moment. I mean, we talked about trials. They name 30 blokes and everyone gets a go and they play a bunch of different positions. So, it doesn't really help us out at all. I think hopefully we can get some answers sooner rather than later so we can start making some decisions, because I think there's, I will touch on in a moment, there's a bit of a flow-on effect potentially for Kalen Ponga as well that might mean we might not go to him as often. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with those players. Like you said, I think that the key for me is going to be Sandon Smith at 9 or off the bench and Phoenix Crossland playing 9 there. And then Dylan Brown and Fletcher Sharp in the halves. I think that's the best for everyone. particularly the GDS coaches. All right, as always, we also jump across to two players that we're either really keen on or maybe we're fading a little bit. You've got the Ford today and you're going with Dylan Lucas. Do you want to talk through why Dylan Lucas is an absolute beast?
Yeah, we already know that he's a bit of a beast, but just wanted to reinforce some of his numbers and maybe talk about some potential upside as well. He developed into one of the strongest, base producing edge forward options in GameDay squad last season. He averaged 58 points per match, driven by elite tackle counts and high run meters. He only scored 5 tries, which is pretty insane. So his attacking upside surely is set to increase this season, given how bad the Knights were last year. I think they had the worst attack in the competition, but B, the addition of Dylan Brown, maybe some renewed hope amongst the playing group. They've got Brown, Sandon Smith. The season is fresh now. They're not staring down the barrel of a wooden spoon. So they might have that renewed hope, and that means surely an uptick in tries across the park. And someone of Dylan Lucas's quality is certainly going to find the try line more times than that. That means the Knights should be scoring more points. Dylan Lucas has a greater chance to find some positive regression in that try scoring department. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him average, a tick over 60. If he attained 58 last season in a pretty bad Knights side, mostly through base and that sort of thing, above 60 points isn't going to be a surprise whatsoever. No second rower averaged above 68 points. Hudson Young was close with 58. Dylan Lucas, 57.7. Preston, 57 himself. So they're hovering around that 60-point mark. I think Dylan Lucas could be that man to get there this season based on some of that positive regression. So I think just like Jacob Preston, we spoke about him in the Bulldogs episode, Lucas remains playable in just about any matchup, but he becomes even a higher priority in game day squad builds when the Knights are heavily favoured and in those smaller slates like plenty of Sunday showdowns. I'm really excited. I think he's going to be an absolute monster.
Yeah, it kind of means that you've got to collect all the Dylan Lucas cards you can because you want to use him across as many competitions as possible.
I need an all-star.
So, yeah, the all-star is the elusive one, obviously. So if we can get our hands on a Jacob Preston and a Dylan Lucas all-star, that would be ideal. But yeah, definitely Dylan Lucas is a great option. I think on the other side, though, I think Kalen Ponga in that fullback position is a really interesting discussion that we can have, and someone that I don't know if I'm as high on as I've been in the past. Ponga only managed the 13 games last season. He finished the second half of the season with the Liz Frank injury, unfortunately. I think that occurred in the second Origin match or a bit later on. And it's one of those injuries that just added to that long list of injury history that Ponga has. And we talk about each and every year. Ponga has just this issue with being injury prone, and he just continues to demonstrate that, and it really hampers his probably true potential, as an NRL player. And as you said, there was some whispers around whether he would stay at the club or move on. There's been, probably more than whispers, really. I think his dad had a lot to say about it as well. But look, if we look at the 13 games from last season, he averaged a touch below 40 GDS points in base and power. That was boosted, though, I think, with the goal kicking duties. And we've heard, as we said, some of those whispers about Sandon Smith taking over the goal kicking duties. If he takes the tee, I think it really puts a dampener on Ponga as a selection at all. So we've got to keep an eye on that. If Sandon Smith comes in, Fletcher Sharp to the wing, I think it's detrimental to Kalen Ponga as well as Fletcher Sharp, and I think it just really throws a spanner in the works for a lot of coaches. If Ponga does get the nod, though, we hope that the Knights improve on their attack. As you said, their worst attack in the competition. They averaged 2.2 tries per game in 2025. That saw them dead last in the competition for crossing the line. So no wonder they came last in the competition. They couldn't score many tries, which meant that Kalen Ponga wasn't kicking many goals either. So we want to hope there's a big uptick there and there's some positive regression so that Ponga can go up in 6s and 9s rather than in those 3s with the goal kicking duty as well. So look, there's so many options at fullback, so many great options. We're halfway through our team previews, and I think in every team we've named an elite fullback or close to that we really love. So look, Ponga's one that's probably not going to be a lock each and every week for me. But if the matchup's right, then yeah, maybe it could be. It might be more of a Sunday look. when we do have the options around how we can play our backs versus our forwards, and we've got the freedom to be able to play all fullbacks if we want to in some of the under 24 competition, for example. So we've got some options there, but I think Ponga, he might just be that matchup dependent player. If we jump back to last season and have a look at one game in particular, he scored 99 points against the Dolphins, and we talked week in, week out about the Dolphins being susceptible to fullbacks. So if we can exploit some of those matchups with that matchup data, I think that's where we're going to get the best out of Ponga. The question mark's just going to be, will he kick goals or not?
Yeah, I guess how much stock do you want to put into last season with the Knights going downhill, with the injury? You look back to 2024, 2023, he averaged 57 and 54 respectively, just the 3 tries in 2024, and still managed to average 54. If you expect a bit of an uptick, sorry, it might have been 64 that he averaged, even better. So he's definitely capable. We know he can go well. The Knights have to be rolling, and he has to be kicking goals as well for it to all work out. Let's just hope we see more of the 2024 Kalyn Ponga than we do the 2025 version. I just want the Knights to be an exciting team, given we're going to have to watch so many of their matches on Sunday. We want them scoring plenty of points, and Kalyn Ponga needs to be amongst that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty, that's the end of our Newcastle Knights preview. We've talked way too much about a bottom-dwelling team. Let's jump across to one of the best teams in the competition. No, let's jump across to the New Zealand Warriors. Stu, do you want to run through how they went last season and then the key ins and outs?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably achieved above expectation, particularly after losing Lukey Metcalf partway through the season. You sort of thought that was the end of them. They still sort of stayed around and made a lot of games competitive. They were there or thereabouts, without really troubling a lot of those top teams. Ran out a bit of gas and juice toward the end of the season. But a 6th place finish on the ladder and an elimination final is probably a respectable result for them. 14 wins and the 10 losses. Couple of outs, but not really too damaging to the squad. If anything, just a little bit of backup in Freddie Lussick, Bunty Afoa, and Tom Arlage. You'd hate some of these big boys to go to another club and absolutely kill it, given that they didn't have much of an opportunity at the Warriors. Look, I don't think they will. They're just sort of depth pieces there as well. Really excited to see what if they can unlock Lothy Khan Pereira. Really good in patches for the Titans, but just didn't seem to get the regular games. There's already whispers around him being a front runner for one of the wing spots ahead of Dallin Watene-Zelezniak. So that must mean, he's come into that club and really gotten into the culture quite nicely and impressing the coach too. So he's pretty handy if the Warriors are going to score some points with his speed, and, they're pretty handy attacking down the edges there. And if he can find a bit of space, he's going to have those big blow-up games as well. So not someone I want to gravitate to straight away. But I think you might want to start off by talking about Torpiki, unless he's your player in focus. Quite interested to see what the Warriors are going to do with him. He's shown so much promise in a number of positions, but how do they balance him and CNK and getting the best out of both of those guys? And I think Torpiki is just going to get better each and every year.
Yeah, he is someone that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the player that in focus. But you're right, he's someone who does have that flexibility and is able to adapt to a number of positions. But obviously, what we want out of him is to be able to play fullback each week. And CNK, look, he's done a job for the Warriors over the last couple of years, but I think the Warriors just need a little bit of spark, and I think Tuapiki is going to give that. So I'm really keen to see him. Look, as you touched on, AKP is one that I'm really interested to see as well. Like you said, potentially he's going to win that wing spot over DWZ, which is a pretty big effort. Dallin had some unreal games across last season, but he obviously had some errors in him as well, and he does like to jam in and tackle no one in particular, and they let a try in on the outside. But look, AKP had a bit of a roller coaster season last year. He had a low of negative 3.2 and a high of 63 GDS points, and I guess that's the volatility of the wing position, and really it's in full force there. He did average 1 try per game though last season, which is quite interesting, and the 63 points actually came off the back of a 200 plus running meter game. So if we can get more of that from him, we know the Warriors love to give their wingers plenty of opportunity to make as much meters off the back fence as possible through the first sort of 3 hit-ups. So if we can see a lot more of that from AKP and then being on the end of some great play, it'll be really awesome. The player that you did touch on as well, Luke Metcalf, there's some word around that he's not going to be ready for the start of the season. We're sort of looking week 7, week 8 potentially. So that might impact some of these players around him as well, that we could be seeing some great footy, but not until Luke Metcalf comes back. The big player on is big Lecker the Wrecker. And look, I can spend a whole podcast talking about Lecker Halasima. And for those listening on the audio, you would have heard the call when he scored that try against the Knights in the dying seconds to win that game from absolute jaws of defeat. And look, he is an absolute star, and I'm so keen to see him in a starting role. Under 24 eligible as well, and he should do big things. Look, I loved him so much. I took him as one of my prize cards last season, and for that reason, that he's going to be available in a couple of competitions. And I think he might end up being one of those players that we look at as a bit of a pod in a full slate and a full round game, and then definitely looking at the prime time, the Sunday Showdown and the under 24. So I think just quietly, you need to collect some more Lecker Halasima cards so that you're ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really expecting a big year 2 breakout for Lecker. He showed fantastic signs in patches, but, such a young, raw player playing big minutes against, some big, tough forward packs is always going to, take a bit of a toll on the body. And he definitely looked really good in patches. And then, he sort of dropped off a little bit and you thought, gee, I thought he was going to be on more GDS points than that. But it's the run meters. Sometimes he sort of went messy a little bit. A lot of scores in the 70-meter type gains, plenty of in the 90s, not really that big, 140, 160 that we see from, these out and out gun edge back rollers. And I think that's where he needs to sort of put his hand up in that department and cart the footy up a little bit more. He only had 3 offloads as well, or 4 offloads in games where he was on the park for over 60 minutes. And there are about 10 or 12 of those matches. So, gee, he's so big. He can be so damaging. If he can work on developing a sneaky little offload and get, 1.5 or 2 offloads per match, gee, that's going to go a long, long way to, moving some of those mid-40 scores up to 50s or mid-50s if he can, get a couple of line break assists or try assists off the back of that. Definitely a year 2 breakout, I think, is on, definitely on the cards. We just want some more consistency probably with ball in hand. He still gets through plenty of tackles, averaging, 34 in those games where he plays over 60 minutes. Is there a chance that we see him frequently around that 80-minute mark? He had a number of matches in the 60s, either side of 80s. So we're going to see a bit more consistency in that department, do you think?
I think so. My gut tells me that they were sort of easing him into that bigger workload and that bigger role. And I feel like this season that they're going to continue probably the first few games where he plays those 60-plus minutes, heading towards that 80-minute player, because I think the Warriors need that. They need that consistent player that's on the field that does a lot of damage for the 80 minutes. And he's definitely got the gas for it. It's just going to be about that workload and managing that workload, making sure he gets those 1 meters up and makes those tackles. But he can tackle break like no one else. And we've obviously seen him make some long distance line breaks and tries as a result. Even I think one game last season, he was on the wing, found himself on the wing at one point, took a ball on the outside and burst through 2 players, ran about 60 meters and scored. So if your edge back row is doing something like that, then I think, you want to try and keep them on the park as long as possible. And look, just quietly at the start there, you said that he had games where he had some big games and then games where he went missing. And I think that really typifies the whole of the Warriors side last season. I think majority of the Warriors side had that. So I think that was just part and parcel with being part of the Warriors, that, you have some big games and then you just go missing throughout the season. But let's hope that for my sake, I've been following them for 30 years, that we get maybe a premiership this year, because I tell you, if we go any longer, I might need to look at a new team.
The boys are in the nation's capital, certainly calling out for more support. Right, and we sort of teased him a little bit earlier there, Lukey Metcalf. Yeah, slated for that sort of round 7 return. I found it really difficult to pick a backline player from the Warriors, given that we've seen a lot of the same sort of stuff over recent years from these guys, and no one's really jumping out to be selected. CNK has some big games. Roger teases us with some really big games and then goes quiet for a stretch. Gee, you'd love as a Warriors fan for him to sort of reignite and have another big season or 2 where he's absolutely killing it, breaking tackles and scoring tries for fun. I'm not sure. I think that might be a little bit beyond him now, but still plenty of hope there for Warriors fans. Look, Lukey Metcalf leading the Dally M competition. He was fantastic. He was the reason that the Warriors were flying, and they were one of the most exciting teams to watch. Not only was he putting on tries, he was scoring plenty himself. he was kicking goals, and then it all sort of went downhill once that pretty devastating injury occurred, and he was out for the rest of the season. The Warriors sort of hung there or thereabouts, but just didn't have that same sort of upside that Metcalf provided. So fingers crossed for you Warriors fans that that rehab is going good, and round 7 is a good time for him to come back, maybe ease into it and hit his straps around that Origin time, and maybe the Warriors can make a late dash there for the 8 or 4 if he's got anything to say about it. Look, he's just 26 years of age, leading the Dally M competition, a third of the way through the season. It's no fluke. It definitely means, he's certainly a talented and a capable footballer. So we'll have to temper our expectations with the round 7 return and, probably a little bit hampered from that injury. We won't see the same sort of ball running that we do. ACL injuries definitely impact power athletes like him. But yeah, around Origin time, I think we might be able to find some form from Lukey Metcalf, and that's certainly when we go looking for these players where we're, on shortened rounds and we need a couple of guys that aren't in the Origin arena that are going to be fresh and, playing against some teams that are hampered by Origin or injury on the other side of the ball as well. Excellent runner of the footy, 8 tries in 15 games, 2.8 goals a game. So I think that's what separates him from a few of the borderline halve options that don't kick goals and don't have that security to go up in threes when their attacking team does score points. So provided, of course, he does hang on to the kicking tee when he does return, that's what brings him a little bit of safety. And you just know that if there are points on offer, he's going to be involved, and then he's likely to go up in 3 as well.
Yeah, it was such a shame that he got injured, but we sort of saw the same thing the year before as well, where the Warriors were going well and he got injured again. So look, hopefully for Metcalf's sake, he can get a full or majority of the season out. And I do like the round 7-8 return as well, sort of nearing Origin time. It's kind of where the Warriors sort of take over the competition a little bit and where they sort of make their move. So, a lot of players across other teams are going to be out due to Origin, and we don't really have too many that find their way into the Origin arena very often. We might miss 1 or 2 maybe. So we have a pretty settled side most of the time. So yeah, if he can come back in and he'll just add something to that. And look, I'm kind of cheating on mine. We did touch on Tuapiki being my player to watch, and look, hopefully you've noticed each episode, Stu and I discuss either a forward and a back each, and we rotate through picking one from each for the team. I've gone with Tuapiki because I was looking through the Warriors forwards, and there wasn't really one that jumped out at me that wasn't named Helasima. And look, I'm going to do a little bit of a throw to the textbook as well. There's a big write-up on Helasima in the FantasyBros textbook. So if you want to hear as much about Helasima as possible, make sure you buy that textbook when that comes out. But look, I'm going to leave Helasima for that. So technically, Tuapiki is a back, but he's currently sort of sitting on the bench. I think he's probably got that utility role. So I'm going to claim him as a forward for this particular reason. But the appeal, however, for me is the position that he might find himself come round 1. You did touch on it. Potentially he could find his way into the starting fullback role. There's been some rumours swirling over at Mount Smart or One Stadium, whatever you want to call it, that Tane might win that fullback role over CNK. And look, if that comes true, I think that's going to be a massive in for a number of competitions. Obviously, we saw the Warriors only have 5 primetime games and 5 Sunday Showdown games, but we could look to play Tuapiki in a number of competitions as well. He found himself at starting fullback for the Warriors on 6 occasions last season. During that time, he averaged 150 run meters, 4 tackles, and almost 5 tackle breaks per game. He also had 4 try assists across those appearances. So it's not something we always associate with Tuapiki. We sort of look at it more as his individual attacking upside, whether that's breaking lines or scoring tries. But yeah, those try assists were quite a nice addition there. That finished with an average of 46.7 GDS points in those 6 games at fullback, which is actually better than Tom Trbojevic, as an example, in that fullback list in 2025. So, that is pretty good reading there. The great thing, what I like about Tuapiki's fullback output last season is he did most of it without Metcalf in the side. So, look, if that's going to be the way of the Warriors for the first half of the season, third of the season, then he'd be a big watch. The other thing is he did actually kick 1 goal last season in one of the games. So, look, if Luke Metcalf does come back and he's not going to kick goals and Tanner Boyd misses plenty off his boot, maybe they do turn to Tuapiki and we get a little bit of extra additional GDS points above that as well. So I'll be keeping a close eye on the Warriors preseason and see if they do roll out Tane in that fullback role.
Yeah, 4.7 tackle breaks, 154 run meters when at fullback. That's a reasonable floor before you factor in, the likelihood of any line breaks, tries, and that sort of thing. And if the Warriors are scoring points, typically it comes through their halves or fullback as well. I think CNK move him out to the center position. He's a pretty handy defender. Adam Pompey is okay in patches. Leitao has shown promising signs with the footy. Their defense is probably a little bit weaker out on some of those edges, particularly if DWZ is a winger outside one of those blokes. Maybe the best combination for the Warriors is to have Tuapiki in the number one and CNK not having to do too much, but just on one side of the field, shoring up that side and getting through plenty of run meters from his own end as well. Yeah, that combination of a few of those exciting players on the field is really important. And gee, we could have a couple of Warriors lining up in our Sunday showdowns or our under 24 comps, and that's always got to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, finally the Warriors become GDS relevant. I think we had maybe 2 last season, and now we've got quite a handful of players that we're pretty keen on. So that's good to see. Alrighty, let's jump across to the Cowboys now. Stu, run us through how the Cowboys went last season and then some of those key player movements.
Yeah, pretty disappointing from the Cowboys. Once again, 12th on the ladder, 9 wins, 14 losses. Really disappointing sort of back end to the season. They just couldn't really get going. There was a match early on, I don't know, around 6 to 8 maybe. They had a win over the Penrith Panthers, and we thought, gee, if the Cowboys can play like this each and every week, they'll be a serious threat throughout the season. But yeah, they just lost matches that they probably should have won. And then they got absolutely belted in other matches as well, where you probably expected them to find it pretty difficult. Just couldn't get a really good read on the Cowboys. And I just felt whenever I wanted to play some of their key players, namely, I reckon, Scotty Drinkwater, he just seemed to maybe the Cowboys as a team let me down a little bit, weren't too flashy or exciting enough with ball in hand. Key outs, Reece Robson to the Roosters. Bit of a direct replacement there for Reed Marnie. Is Reed Marnie as good as Reece Robson? Maybe not, probably not. But, even Reece Robson was pretty quiet the back end of last year or a lot of that season as well. Maybe it's because he had, some different career aspirations on the horizon. But we didn't quite see the running game from him all season long. He definitely got through plenty of tackles. It was the reverse for Reed Marnie. His role at the Doggies got smaller and smaller throughout the season when he was becoming a bit of an interchange forward. So I think, that might inject some new life and confidence there into the Cowboys. And if they're going to go any good, they're going to need to get Reed Marnie running from hooker, just like Reece Robson was, and being a threat. The Cowboys have been really successful in the past when Reece Robson has had his big matches. So we didn't see enough of that from them last season. The big important role change is probably Jackson Purdue and where he's going to line up. There's obviously a bit of chat about him in the centres, but more recently playing in the halves alongside Tommy Dearden. That looks the direction that the Cowboys are going to go into, accommodate a spot there for Tommy Chester in the centres as well, provided he's okay. And that slight tweak during the preseason camp, wasn't too serious, but seems like their strongest lineup will have Purdue in the halves. And we know from recent experience that hasn't been great for Scotty Drinkwater. Any Drinkwater truthers out there who love a Scotty Drinkwater score love when Jake Clifford is named in the 7 there. Just not sure what we'll see from that side. But I think in terms of moving forward, Jackson Purdue, Tommy Dearden, 2 of their quality ball players there, getting their hands on the ball as often as possible, as well as Scotty Drinkwater at the back. G12, pretty ordinary finish. I expect them to go a little bit better this year.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on Jackson Purdue quickly. I think you're right there in that his best role is probably going to be in the halves and Tom out in centre. Tom Chester is the player that I'm going to talk about in a moment as well. And yeah, there is some concern around him potentially, but it'll just be interesting to see how that team shapes up. And look, Scotty Drinkwater is one of those players that he just goes along quietly with his business and ends up having the most try assists in a season. And you think, where did that come from? We didn't see that at all, and all of a sudden he's got all those try assists. So he's always someone in the back of our minds, and he became a popular player last season for a number of coaches, but he just didn't always get the job done. And if Jackson Purdue is going to be in the halves and that diminishes potentially Drinkwater's output, then I think that's going to be obviously a big loss for a lot of coaches. But the player that I'm really interested in and want to keep an eye on a little bit is Jeremiah Nanai. Obviously, he's not going to start the season with he's still got that injury, but just looking back at last season, he had some big games and he had some really disappointing games. He started from off the bench a little bit, had a few 50 to sort of 30 to 50 minute games where he didn't really produce much at all, and then he had a big 70-minute performance where he scored 77 GDS points, and we thought, all right, he's back, the try scoring machine himself. I think he dotted over for 2 tries in that game, and as he does, and then once again he just fell off the face of a cliff almost, and his scores just plummeted. He ended up finishing the season with a whole lot of 80-minute performances in a row and really couldn't get above sort of 50 GDS points at sometimes not even over 30. So yeah, it's really disappointing from a player who has so much potential, who is such a good ball runner and then such a good player in the air. They obviously target him with the ball up in the air like we've seen plenty of times in the past. He is eligible for the under-24 competition. We're not sure of his timeline exactly, or I'm not sure of his timeline exactly when he will return. But is that someone you're just going to completely ignore and based on last season, or are we going to give him an opportunity to try and show us that he's got something left in the tank?
Yeah, don't love it. Definitely don't love it. You just got to look at his run meters column again, from round 14 onwards or 15 onwards, 64, 83, 94, 107, 93, 70, 52, 69, 40. And just about all of those matches, 80 minutes. That's not enough run meters for someone who doesn't get through enough tackles, let's be honest. 25.7 tackles a game last season for Nanai in that edge back row. A lot of the elite back rows that we want to be playing in Game Day squad are averaging, mid to high 30s in terms of the tackle numbers, and their run meters are 10, 15, 20 meters higher as well. So Nanai's tackle efficiency isn't anywhere near as good as them either. He's missing more tackles than he is breaking tackles. So too many red flags for me. He's going to need to go back to that round 8 fixture against the Titans where he did score 2 tries, 130 run meters. It just went downhill from there. He could never sort of repeat what he dished out early on. He sort of, dusted his hands off, going, oh, yeah, decent game from me. My spot's secure for the rest of the season. The Cowboys need him moving forward. They need him being a weapon in attack, both off the kick chase, but also with ball in hand. 60, 50, 70 run meters, not good enough. He's got to be putting his hand up, getting above 50, getting above 100 consistently.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Cohen Hess. I remember Cohen Hess went through that big period of scoring plenty of fantasy points, and then he just went, all right, I'm done. I think he played a really good Origin game and went, all right, I've made it. I've done the best I could in my career. I'm just going to hang back now and ride the success from that. So yeah, hopefully Jeremiah Nanai doesn't go the way of Cohen Hess, and hopefully we can see a bit more from Nanai because I think he's going to be an important under-24 player if he does pick up his game a little bit there. Look, the Cowboys don't have too many games in the prime time or the Sunday Showdown, just the 7 on the Thursday, Friday, and just the 6 in the Showdown. So I don't think we're going to be turning to them too often. It's just going to be some of those bigger names that we want to see perform, your Drinkwaters, maybe like you said, the Marnies, and then Jackson Purdue, obviously. So let's jump across to the players that we're going to keep an eye on. And it is that man, Reed Marnie, that you are looking at for this season. Tell us about what you think for Reed Marnie.
Yeah, not necessarily hot, nor am I cold on Reed Marnie. I'm just sort of interested to see what the change of club, the new environment does for Marnie, whether that sort of reinvigorates his desire, his passion for the game, and he could come out, all guns blazing and give us a really difficult consideration there at hooker with a few other names to pick from. We need more good hooking options. He can put his name amongst the high quality performers there in the hooker position, but a few things certainly need to go his way. So I'm not super tempted. His stats last year won't tell you too much of a story, but I think context here is really important. He obviously moves to the Cowboys, and that move was slated for a lot of last season, or certainly toward the back end anyway. And the Dogs wanted to go in a different direction. His minutes were drastically reduced. He was even just a low minute, interchange forward. It crucified his GDS numbers. So if you're looking at the stats center and you're filtering by average, he's going to be, way down there. By season's end, his average was just a tick over 35 points, which was a whole 10 points down from his previous year's average. But Reece Robson now moves on from the Cowboys to the Roosters. Reed Money could be in for an 80-minute role there, and we hadn't seen him in a running 80-minute role for a long, long time. His role at the Bulldogs was sort of a dish off the ground, either to Matty Burton or to Lockie Galvin midway and late last season. He was just passing from the deck, and let's be honest, a lot of anyone else in the competition, you or I, could almost do exactly what Reed Marnie did in attack. He didn't do much at all, so he was getting no GDS points with footy in hand. He was sort of just reliant on plenty of tackles, which he certainly can get through. In 60-minute games, 48 tackles per game is what Reed Marnie has been pumping out. Cowboys definitely had Reece Robson running the footy early on and midway through the season, and that was a big reason for a lot of their successful matches. He ended up averaging just the 53 run meters come season's end. But look, Marnie's running game was stunted at the Dogs. He is capable, and only 18 average run meters per game last season is woeful for a 60-minute hooker. That's got to go in the right direction. The tackle numbers will have to go up with more minutes. So there is a chance that we see, I think, maybe an average, not necessarily north of 50, but I feel like an average closer to 50 than we see 40 is possible. And that puts him in the conversation, at least for a shortened slate, where you just want a reliable hooker that's going to stay on the park for the whole 80 minutes, get through plenty of tackles, and still have a little bit of upside running the footy or darting over or putting a big boy over from close to the line. So one to watch. Hopefully we see a bit from the trials, but those early couple of fixtures are going to tell us what to expect from Reed Marnie in Cowboys colours.
Yeah, for sure. Look, mate, I don't know about you. I'm happy to bend over and pick up the ball and did off, but I am not keen on making 48 tackles a game. No. So I think Marnie can keep that role. He's got that stitched up. But yeah, I think the key is going to be that 80-minute role. If he can maintain 80 minutes on the park, we talk about it. We talked about it a lot last season. We love our 80-minute hookers because they get through so much work that even if he is only tackling and he does nothing else in 80 minutes and he can take that 48 average in 60 minutes and turn it to something a little bit higher, that would be, unreal. And as long as he's not missing any, then I'd be happy to bank 40 or 50 points just through tackles and that's it. So, it's just going to be a watch for me at the moment. As you say, not hot, not cold. It's just something that we've got to consider, what is his minutes makeup going to be? And at the moment, I just see a clear run for him to play 80. I don't see there's any other need for him not to. We've seen it in the past, and it's what Reece Robson was doing throughout some matches. So I think it's just an easy like-for-like replacement, and hopefully you can get a running game, as you say. Look, jumping across, we did touch on Tom Chester and the potential of him being from that massive ACL rupture that he had last year, and as a result, he missed all of 2025. Look, we're likely to see him come back into the centres. We're still not sure about the latest injury that he has sustained, which was an MCL injury, as Stu said in the preseason. There's no word yet if he's good to go. I know they've got trials coming up, and they've got the biggest game the week before the full round kicks off. So they've got a bit of a shortened timeline there. So we're not exactly sure what Tom Chester's timeline looks like, or whether he's going to get the starting role there at centre. It's probably going to depend on Jackson Purdue as well. But look, if he does start there, in 2024, he started in centres a number of times, and he averaged 30 in base and power there. It's not probably the best base and power that we would talk about, but for a centre, if that's their floor, I'm pretty happy to take that as a centre's floor. We don't often see that with centres and wingers, so I'm pretty happy to take that 30 in base and power with the added upside of what we've seen from Tom Chester in the past, where he can light up the field if he's given some space and time with the ball in hand. The thing I love most, though, about Tom Chester is his ability to adapt in game. And look, we've seen that a number of times from the Cowboys, where we've seen Chester line up at fullback in the past as well in 2023. And in those games, I think he had 4 games and he scored in every single one of those games that he played at fullback. He's just got this natural speed. He's got some great footwork that he's able to beat defenders with. And actually, if you go back and look at some of the footage from the Queensland Cup in 2024, he just runs these really nice lines in the centre role. We don't see that a lot, where the centre is actually running through this lovely gap, and it's usually the edge back rowers that are running that that sort of line through a big gap in the defence, but it was actually he was able to get outside of his man and create that space on the outside and run that really nice line. So if we can see Chester doing some of those things again, I think that'll be unreal. If he gets a chance at fullback and he has a sniff, I think he's going to be a great option. He's got the centre tag. If he, for whatever reason, Drinkwater goes down or maybe, he doesn't perform as well as he has been and they give Chester a run, I think that could be a great out of position play with the centre tag for sure. As I said, though, unfortunately, the bloke just, he just has no luck at all. Hopefully he gets through this MCL injury and we get to see him light it up in Vegas. But if not, hopefully very soon, because I think he is a great young player and we just want to see a full season or even just half a season out of Tommy Chester. So hopefully he's good to go.
Got a feel for the bloke, don't you? Made his debut in 2022 and just the 12 games since his debut in 2022 and not due to a lack of talent whatsoever. Just so many, cruel injuries. He spent a bit of time during 2024 playing Cup and, was really good there, scoring almost a try a game. So he's definitely got the talent. He's just, 24 years old and a couple of serious injuries and now a preseason injury is never something that you want for these young blokes that certainly require a lot of footwork, a lot of agility, power, speed, that sort of thing. So, was definitely someone that we were pretty tempted by. This is obviously a big setback in terms of our like toward him. Let's just hope his rehab gets through. He gets back into that Cowboys jersey and we'll reassess after that. But if he does find a spot at fullback for whatever reason, he definitely has a game to light up fantasy.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty, that's the end of the Cowboys preview. We've got one more team to get through. That's the Parramatta Eels. Stu, as always, do you want to run us through their last season and their movement?
Yeah, G, we haven't had many, fantastic teams to talk about. Pretty dour episode in terms of how they went the season prior. Parramatta Eels, really disappointing as well. 11th in the season, 10 wins, 14 losses. Again, a lot of discussion about a number of their players and mid-season signings. Obviously, there with, Dylan Brown's exit, there was a lot, written about him. And I think Zach Lomax has been in the news just about, every single week. So that it's never quiet over there at Parramatta. So it must be difficult for players and, coaching staff to prepare for matches when all of this stuff is going on in the background and, teammates are asking for millions of dollars and looking for moves to other clubs and that sort of thing. But look, let's hope the Parramatta Eels are a little bit more settled now. Mitchy Moses should be in line for a full season. Fingers crossed if you're a Para fan or want Mitchy Moses scoring plenty of points in your halves for GameDay squad. But look, Dill Brown wasn't amazing for him for the Eels, sort of in his last little stint there, knowing that he was heading up to Newcastle. So it's not going to be too much of a loss for them. I think they already sort of planned for a future without Dill Brown, and they've got some pretty promising, pretty good youngsters that got plenty of game time last season. That's only going to make good use of for this season. I think Isaiah Yongi, they've just signed Jonah Pezzett as well. I think they're going to be two really exciting guys for them with a lot of talent. Still young, still raw, not quite the Dylan Brown mold just yet, but hopefully a little bit of enthusiasm and blokes, playing with a bit of pride and passion is what the Eels need. A couple of key ins. I think Jack de Bellin's a bit of an underrated in for them. He gets through plenty of work and he's been pretty quiet in terms of his on or off field antics recently and just getting his head down and playing footy. And that's what you want to see as a Parramatta Eels fan. There's been plenty of games where, he has been pretty handy from a GDS perspective. If he's getting the minutes, he'll certainly get through the work. There's just a bit of a logjam there for forwards at the Eels, isn't there? So, we may not see too much from Jack de Belin unless there's a bit of an injury crisis. Brian Kelly gets to reignite his career at the Eels. A bit disappointing for the Titans in recent seasons as well. He sort of threatened a lot early on in his career, and his partnership with Dave Fafita at times was just almost unstoppable. He finds a new home down there at Parramatta. And Jonah Pezzett from the Storm, the tutelage from, Craig Bellamy, Cam Munster, Jerome Hughes, Ryan Pappenhausen, Harry Grant around him. He's going to take a lot of experience there to Parramatta. And look, he may not be someone that we flock to in terms of playing him, but look, he could be one of those names we talk about in seasons to come. And I think he's on the move again pretty soon. But yeah, I think the Eels will want to get a lot out of him. And he could be really good for Mitchy Moses and get Mitchy Moses back averaging amongst the top 3 or 5 halfbacks.
Yeah, it is an interesting situation, I guess, for Jonah Pezzett. He's got with the Eels before he's moving over to Broncos for the 2027 season. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays and how he fits into that team and what that looks like. He's obviously got that starting role in the halves with Mitchy Moses, and he could actually turn into something really special, particularly for the under-24 comp in the Sunday Showdown. 10 Sunday Showdown games for the Eels this season, so plenty of opportunities to play Parramatta Eels. And yeah, he could just be one of those players that starts slow and then just really build into his work. And look, just go back to that first finals game that the Storm had against the Bulldogs in week 1 of the finals, and he came off the bench and had an absolute blinder. He scored 67 GDS points off the bench. He's starting role with Mitch Moses, more time and space with the ball in hand, playing 80 minutes. He could be anything. Obviously, as you say, very young, very raw, alongside a number of young blokes in that team as well. Probably one of the youngest in the competition potentially. But there's so much upside, I think, there as well. And there's a number of other under-24 players that we could talk about. One, I couldn't believe Will Penasini was only 24. He looks like he's bloody 40 when he's on the field. But that's a great upside there as well. He's a definite pod in the centres, and he can play some unreal footy. So I like the look of Will Penasini there too. Just couldn't believe he's 24.
Yeah, I just had to Google his age just to double check. 23 years old, apparently, born in 2002. I was almost graduating high school by the time he was born, and he looks like he could almost get away with being my father. He was even, in contention for a starting spot for us. Maybe not necessarily last year, but, seasons past where the Eels were pretty decent and Moses was having a full season. I remember Will Penasini, being one of the top 3 or 4 centres, and you'd almost pivot across to play a Penasini on a Sunday Arvo if you wanted a little bit of upside, or go for a pot against someone else if you were close to them on the leaderboard. And he's still only 23, and we get his services in the under-24 comp. You beauty. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. Alrighty, let's move on. Let's have a chat about some of our key players. And you've got the backs here, mate, and you've gone with that man, Mitchy Moses, who, look, hopefully he's going to have a big season. He sort of teased us for a number of seasons, and hopefully this is the year that he has a big one.
Yeah, just the 13 games last year, returning from injury. Quietly went about his business with an average of 44 points, well down from his 53 the season prior, but certainly capable and certainly a player that can rack up some pretty decent fantasy points on his day. We saw both his run and kick meters reduce following that return from injury, so you probably expect that injury played a role in that, and he was maybe just managing that a little bit. Full preseason, no whispers about any niggles or setbacks from Mitchy Moses' point of view. So I think that's great heading into the start of the season, that there's a high expectation that he's going to be ready to rip in this year, and probably going to fall back into that running role with plenty of kick meters. And with no Dylan Brown there, the responsibility does increase. We did say that, Jonah Pezzett is definitely a very capable and very good up-and-coming player, but certainly no Mitchy Moses. And it's Mitchy Moses' team, and while he's out there on the park, he's going to be doing absolutely everything he can to win the game for the Parramatta Eels. We're going to see him shift both sides of the field. It wouldn't surprise me to see him, get a ball from Jonah Pezzett on the left-hand side of the field, and then, look for a little kick in behind or a cut out to the winger, that sort of thing. We're going to see him, play plenty of footy down both hand sides of the field. We're going to see his kick numbers return pretty high as well. Pezzett obviously hasn't done, too much kicking in a first-grade side. Mitchy Moses has one of the better boots on his day in the competition. He can find grass and he can hoof the ball downfield as well. And, it doesn't have to be a glorious kick. It just needs to find some meters, and we get some GDS points as a result. Naturally that playmaking opportunity is going to rise. Does it mean he'll overplay his hand at times? Look, probably, but that's not, the worst case scenario. If it means he's finding some half breaks, if he's putting blokes through the gaps, or if he's scoring some tries as well, if he can get back to any of that, 2023, 2024 season form, he's going to be right up in the conversation with halfbacks. They're in amongst the top 3 or top 5 in the competition. He wants a sky blue jersey. There's a lot of talk about him being a better game manager than Nathan Cleary, and the Blues having a bit more success when Moses is wearing that jersey. And look, if he hits the ground running, and he's going to give the selectors a pretty big headache. And look, if you can get your name in a conversation alongside Nathan Cleary, you're definitely doing something right out there on the footy field. So I probably won't rush into him from the get-go. Look, if the matchup suits and he's proving that, the added responsibility of running the side, no Zach Lomax to kick to will be detrimental. But look, with increased touches, more opportunity with the ball in hand, surely does result in an increase in fantasy points. Just want to see him back to his normal running game, getting plenty of kick meters. And at some stage, I think he will become a pretty handy point of difference and probably one of the most played on a slate during a Sunday Showdown as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where his upside is going to be, is that Sunday Showdown with so many games on that slate and having the 3 options at half. I think that's going to be a big in for Mitchy Moses. And yeah, you're probably right around a number of those things, the return to injury. So hopefully with, plenty of time with all the boys, plenty of time being able to get his body back right, hopefully we see a big season from him, and hopefully for his sake as well as everyone else's, that we do get a full season out of him because we haven't had that for a couple of years. So hopefully Mitch Moses is ready to go. Look, another player that's, again, I feel like I'm not hot and I'm not cold on is Jack de Belin. You touched on him moving over to the Eels from the Dragons, and sometimes I think with player movement, some coaches might get this little bit of hope that, their role might change a little bit. There might be a little bit in it for them. They might want that to impress their new club. But for me, I don't know if a lot changes from Jack de Belin moving from the Dragons to the Eels. Look, I would love for a 2023 version of Jack de Belin to come back, but another year around the sun, plus the stacked Eels forward pack. A lot of young blokes, but a lot of mouths to feed there as well. I just don't see a world where Jack de Belin's going to get more than those sort of 55 minutes, similar to what he got last season. And look, in games that he didn't have, when he was starting at lock and didn't have 55 minutes or more on the field, he only averaged 40 GDS points. When he did start at lock and he was above 55 minutes, he averaged almost 1 point per minute. So he definitely benefits from more time on the park, as you would expect. But just for me, whether he's going to have all of those minutes, I could completely eat my words, though. Look, if de Belin does come out and plays like he did in 2023, where he was averaging 70 minutes on the park and averaging 60 GDS points just in base and power, he will be a go-to each and every week, I think, not just on that Sunday Showdown slate, but on a regular full round slate as well with those kind of numbers. The problem is we've seen it a few times over at the Eels, this promise of an absolute powerhouse for GDS, only to be completely ruined by that forward rotation. And look, we just have to look at the ex-GOAT, I guess you want to call him, in Jermaine Hopgood and what he was producing for, the bulk of a season. And then all of a sudden it's flipped around and his minutes just drastically fall out from under him. And he turns into an absolutely no-go player for GDS. So we don't want to see that for Jack de Belin. There are a lot of mouths to feed at the Eels. So I just want to see an early indication of JDB's minutes before I really pull the trigger on him, because at this stage, if he gets less than 55, that's a big fade for me.
Yeah, look, again, not someone I'm super tempted on either. The name that you did mention I like more is actually that Jermaine Hopgood, and we know that he had a very poor, start and middle part of the season, but he seemed to get that role, as prop toward the end of the season, and his numbers in the back half was so much better, and hopefully the Parramatta Eels coaching staff have identified that that's where he needs to play, and he was regularly getting through more than 60 minutes, making 37, 38, 40 tackles per game. There was one game where he made 60 tackles playing 80 minutes and still getting through, 90 to 100 plus run meters as well. For Hopgood, for de Belin, the real issue is that forward pack and the makeup of the bench. Look, if they go in with a Josiah Papali'i or a Talon De Silva in number 14, that surely does mean a little bit of an increase in minutes in terms of likelihood for those middle forwards. But if we see a 4-forward bench, which we have seen Para opt for, with Dill Walker being sort of flexible as someone who's pretty good through the middle, or at least was last season, and can maybe fill in at number 9 at a pinch if Riley Smith can't. We certainly don't want Hopgood sliding into hooker, because he's absolutely atrocious in terms of his fantasy point accumulation in that regard. But yeah, look, 4 forwards on the bench would be an absolute no-no for any of those guys. Still really good forwards there in Polo, in Jackie Williams playing through the edge and the middle as well. So even that murkies the water even further. That makeup of the bench, I think, is key. Dylan and Stu, Josiah Papali'i. We should expect that means Riley Smith doesn't see a full 80. Does he move into lock? Probably not. They've got enough big boys there to do the job, and that should mean an uptick for the blokes like Jackie Williams, Hopgood, and Jack DeBellin. Just a wait and see for a lot of those blokes for me.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, keeping an eye on the preseason and then into the first team list Tuesday. Man, that's going to be an absolute Christmas day when that happens. Alrighty, that is the end of our team previews, but is not the end of the show. If you are a regular on the Fantasy Bros team previews, you will know that we love to open some packs. And the best part of us opening packs is that the viewers and listeners get to win some unreal cards. As Stu mentioned, we have already opened a number of packs based on the previous previews, and all of those teams are up for grabs in this pack as well. So we've got the Knights, Warriors, Cowboys, Eels, as well as all the teams that we've previewed previously. They are all up for grabs. So it's an unreal opportunity to get as many cards as we can into that giveaway pool. To enter the giveaway, all you need to do is simply subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's at FantasyBros AU. Make sure you like the video, and then comment who your MVP player is for the 2026 season based on this show. So based on those 4 teams, that means you can have up to 6 entries across the giveaway. We're doing it for every team preview, and then we've got a special preview coming your way as well. 6 opportunities to get involved in the giveaway, making sure that you have as many opportunities possible. We're going to draw those winners on our live first round preview on the 4th of March before that season commences. Alrighty, let's jump into a pack. I'm going to share my screen here, and then we've got a 9-player unique to open. Just bear with me while this happens.
So does that mean in episode 5, there's a guarantee of 9 players being added to the player pool?
You are an absolute genius. Correct. That is unreal.
How good. Guarantee 9.
Unless there's a no active team. No, let's not talk about that glitch again.
What are we predicting? How many to the player pool in tonight's opening? I'm going to go
I reckon it's 6. 5. Yeah. All right, let's hit it. Let's try and get as many as we can. Here we go. We've got
we like to see
good animation. We've got
and it's taking ages.
The exploding pack, and it's diamonds as possible. Alrighty, let's start down. Let's start here. All right, so we've got at least 1 diamond. We've got a Luke Gardner Platt to start off. We've got a Tyron Wishart, so he goes in because we have already previewed the Storm. But a Nathan Cleary Platt.
Oh. Unlucky.
Oh, man. I think we'll just put it in. Should we?
Do we throw
it
in?
Yeah,
let's do it.
We'll see how we go. We'll see what these other ones. We've got a Taniela Paseka from the Seagulls, so he goes into the player pool. We've got a Sandon Smith. There we go from the Knights. Could be this season for sure. We've got an Ed of a Penrith Panthers pack. This one, and we're finishing Rudolph Platt goes into the giveaway as well. Alrighty, and we've got 2 what we can get. We've got a Rocco Berry from the Warriors. I believe he might not be starting the season. I think he had some touch-up surgery in the off-season, didn't quite take, so he's gone back under the knife again, but he should be back, hopefully playing in the centre, a great defensive centre. And then the other diamond with Al Lawton as well. So, yep, I'm gonna make the executive decision that Nathan Cleary can go into the giveaway pool as well. So plenty of cards there in the giveaway pool, plenty on offer. So make sure you just need to like and subscribe on the Fantasy Bros YouTube channel. Comment who your MVP is for this episode across those 4 teams. Don't forget as well, if you are a new user, make sure you sign up using the promo code FBRL26. That's all capital letters for the FBRL, and you'll get 3x9 player common packs to start your Game Day Squad Dynasty. Stu, that is it, mate. We've got a number of teams down, not many to go. The next episode, which is going to come to everyone next Tuesday, is the Panthers, Dolphins, and Rabbitohs. So make sure you are listening out on Apple Podcast or Spotify, as well as heading to our YouTube channel to watch all of our previews. Don't forget as well to jump across on our YouTube and Spotify to check out how the AFL boys are going. They've done plenty of team previews as well. Get involved in that, even if you just throw together a starter team because you've got no idea like I do. I'm just going to follow the bros and hopefully I come out with a few victories. Alrighty, mates, we've done it, 1 hour and 10 minutes. We did pretty well to get that under 20 minutes per team.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Some really good insight there. I will catch up with you very soon for the next team preview. Everyone else, have a great weekend, and hopefully we get some good footy this weekend. Have a good one,
Thanks,
mate.
Dyl. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode by the Fantasy Bros. If you want to show your support, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Also, make sure you check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search @FantasyBros AU.